You know, it's kind of funny. I talk a lot about a thrash metal drought, but for the first time ever on the Metal Meltdown, we're talking about two different thrash metal releases in 1 week. Maybe 2021 is the year of thrash metal. We'll have to see. Maybe. Bionic Swarm is the debut album from Cryptosis, a Dutch sci-fi, progressive, and thrash metal band previously known as Distillator. And while they did enjoy some modest underground success as Distillator in the 2010s, I highly doubt Cryptosis would argue that rebranding themselves was for the worse. Because in 1 year, a remarkably small amount of time when you really think about it, they've already been signed to Century Media Records, they've already released a ton of splits and singles, including one alongside Vector, I would argue the poster boy for the modern thrash metal movement, even despite some controversies. Now arriving at the forefront of the aforementioned Bionic Swarm, in arguably their biggest and most triumphant release to date. Not just musically, but thematically and arguably literally as well. I mean, seriously, folks, before we even dive headfirst into the written material of this record, I gotta say, the production here, the feel, the size of the record, it's just gigantic. It is so dense, it is so lively, it is cram-packed with keyboards and synthesizers and guitar pyrotechnics and huge high-concept sci-fi storytelling. It brings to mind some of the most ambitious and fantastical works from the aforementioned Vector, namely their last studio album, Terminal Redux. But that is itself, to be entirely honest, maybe just a little bit of a problem. Not a huge one, mind you, but it does prevent this record from being the revolutionary thrash metal record that Cryptosis clearly envisioned it to be. And I don't really feel like I'm being hyperbolic here because, my god, this press release makes them sound pretentious as fuck. Writing such things here as evolution is essential to survival. In the ever-changing world of heavy music, that's an undeniable reality as the march of time gathers speed and threatens to crush us all under its heels. It's time to make way for the futuristic, multi-metal eruption of Cryptosis. Going on to say, the Dutch trio are now pursuing a natural and idiosyncratic course dedicated to conjuring heavy music that dares to think differently. But here's my favorite piece from the same press release. Reborn as forward-thinking explorers of the extreme metal cosmos, Cryptosis is what happens when metal is allowed to evolve, to expand, and to breathe. An invigorating shot in the arm for the entire metal scene. And look, it's great to have ambitions, it's great to have goals, and it's great to have dreams, but I can't help but feel like these guys are just a little full of shit when ultimately what they describe as revolutionary I could boil down to Vector 2.0. And that's not inherently a bad thing. I mean, if you're gonna copy, it may as well be a band as fucking badass as Vector. But it does arguably rob the music of a little bit of its originality and ambition, particularly when it is apparently a literal selling point of the record. To put it very simply, if you've been sold the most revolutionary thrash metal record in recent memory, you might walk away a little disappointment. But if you're walking into this just hoping for some tasty, explosive sci-fi thrash jams, booyah! This is for you. You've got tracks like Prospective Immortality, which pairs some very melodramatic and explosive mid-pace thrash metal with some very ominous and atmospheric keyboards and orchestration. It's very fierce and even theatrical in its best moments without ever feeling over the top or overwhelming. Then you've got a track like Transcendence, which just kind of rampages forward at breakneck speed with the kind of technical intensity that I would expect from like more modern Revocation and even some early Havoc, as well as the aforementioned Vector. Somewhat similarly, the track Death Technology, a very triumphant and declarative and provocative cut, manages to find a super sweet spot between the very raw and rambunctious early speed metal of Killing Is My Business era Megadeth, and the zanier, more avant-garde and angular thrash of Killing Technology era Voivod. In fact, both the lead riff and the main hook, intentionally or not, seem to hearken to the title tracks from these respective albums. Top that off with a slew of tracks like Game of Souls and Flux Divergence and many more that completely indulge in sci-fi progressive thrash vector worship, and frankly, you've got an album ripe with incredible guitar work, fantastic percussion, and some really great dense production. Sometimes maybe a little too dense, I will admit. It does occasionally suffocate itself and crush under its own weight, drowning out certain elements here and there, but hey, for a debut album, I'm really impressed how much they got in here. The concept of the record is pretty neat too. Again, not quite as mind-blowing as advertised, boiling down to a Terminator-esque setting in which technology rules over a dystopian future. But it's still interesting enough that it keeps the momentum of the record going. It still feels epic, it still feels powerful and melodramatic when it needs to be without getting in the way of everything else, and most importantly, it never brings the record to a grinding halt, having to explain different scenarios and characters and themes or whatever the fuck. Like I said before, folks, it's basically Vector 2.0, and honestly, again, that's not really a bad thing, especially not if, like myself, you are hungry for some super tasty, spacey, explosive, sci-fi, progressive thrash in the vein of motherfucking Vector. I'd give this thing a 3.5 out of 5. I thoroughly enjoyed this thing. Is this the mind-blowing thrash metal spectacle that the promo materials promised? No, but I never took them too seriously to begin with. Ultimately, what matters is that the record provides some potent and energetic, spacey thrash jams, and that is exactly what it fucking does. There is certainly a lot of potential here and a lot of foundation for Cryptosis to build on to make the exact record that they are advertising here, something that I very much look forward to seeing. Mind you, I would suggest perhaps a gentle reshuffling of the actual track list itself, as the first 3 or 4 songs just aren't quite as strong as the rest of the material on this album. But all things considered, there's no real filler to speak of, there's no time wasted, it's mostly well produced and consistently well performed, and what the fuck more could you possibly ask from a band of Cryptosis's sound and style? So yeah, 3.5 out of 5, maybe a touch pretentious as far as the promotional stuff is concerned, but by no means a terrible or unlistenable record. I had a lot of fun with this, and if you're looking for some more tasty sci-fi thrash, I think you need to be on the lookout for this. You definitely need to check it out. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.